Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Junk Be Gone, Phoenix Conversions.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the show. The Vols beat Wait. Yeah, the game is finally over. That's true. 28-10, Tennessee wins in a ugly slog to bring the regular season to a close. The ending wasn't pretty, but the season, that final record of 7-5, prettier than what it looked like it was going to be when they were 1-4. I can tell you that. Bowl bound. So we got a lot of topics today. We're going to shake things up. We're going to do, since that was a slog last night, we're going to talk more about season review type stuff today, as well as last night's game. But season review type stuff plus some basketball. Let's dive in. First segment of our program is brought to you by Phoenix Conversions. And that Tennessee's 1-4 to 7-5 turnaround, that's the kind of Phoenix-style conversion that Phoenix Conversions can do for your truck, van, SUV, or your fleet of work vehicles if you're the boss man. Check out their website. You see it right there, phoenixconversions.com. And you'll be very impressed by what they can do for you as a person, what they can do for you as your business. Been #1 in this town since 1987, Phoenix Conversions. All right, want to welcome in the first wave of panelists today, and there are 10 of us on this show today. We've got Bob Hodge, Will Overstreet, Josh Ward, Jimmy Himes. All right, gentlemen. We are year-round, of course, so we'll be back next week with some basketball, some recruiting, some more football, bowl talk. But as I say, I want to dive in and do kind of a speed round type thing today. I had one place to start, one big thing that I wanted to touch on from last night, and it's the same thing that I think everybody's wanted to talk about today, and that's Eric Gray. Let's take a look at some of his accomplishments. In terms of all-time rushing best at Tennessee, that's the 5th best day ever. Ever. You haven't seen anything to that level since 1990. I mean, that is a generational type performance, one of the best ever. It'll go down in UT history. In addition to that, he ripped off the second longest run from scrimmage in Tennessee history. Kelsey Finch had a 99-yarder against Florida. Gray's 94-yarder last night. Dick Dodson, 91 yards versus Transylvania in 1921. And by the way, I was thinking about it last night. It's not easy to abbreviate Transylvania in this day and age, so I just put Transylvania all the way out there.
I remember that run. It drove a stake through their heart.
Yes, it did. All right. Guys, your thoughts on Eric Gray and his performance last night in the offensive line?
I think you look at Eric Gray, and I think his whole thing was speed, and you really hadn't seen that a whole lot this year because he didn't hit a lot of clean holes. There was a lot of times he made yards and had to jump around, and I think you got to see what I think got him to UT was just that flat line speed, because once he got in the clear, you're sitting there, you knew he's gone. There was nobody going to catch him. So that was the impressive thing. You finally got to see his speed.
And I think it was impressive, too, because you haven't had a home run hitter at running back in a long time, in the sense of he does get to the second level. If he makes that guy miss, it's touchdown. And so being able to see a guy with that level, that ability, and what people have been talking about in the summer really come true and be able to show, okay, if you can get this guy one-on-one with the safety, the chances are you may be raising your hands a lot more of the times that he's going to score. So just seeing that there is that type of talent and young guy that may be learning a little bit better gives you some hope for the future of there may be something special back there.
Vanderbilt, terrible against the run. We talked about that on Friday on your radio show, Jimmy. They've let a lot of people run against them, but still, 246 is 246 against anybody. Your thoughts on the way the Tennessee run game took control? If anything, they probably could have gone to it a little sooner.
Yeah, is it a game if that doesn't happen? I mean, maybe Tennessee's offense said, let's take some shots to the air, and Juwan Jennings and Marquez Callaway bail them out. But if you don't have those big plays to kind of put Vanderbilt away, maybe it's a game there in the second half with bad weather, and you start to worry about, Eric Gray kind of took that away.
Well, yeah, because Garantano wasn't playing very well, was he? He started out 0 for 7, and he was 1 for 8 with a pick in the first quarter. The thing about Gray is, I recall, first of all, I think he was committed to Michigan, and then he was a late addition to – well, Tennessee recruited him late. They weren't sure they wanted him. It's a good thing they did. But the other thing that I think played into his in the situation last night was Tennessee realized the weather, the wetness, the wind, all that. This is not going to be a game where you throw it 40 times. I think the reason Eric Gray wasn't playing as much earlier was his lack of ability in pass protection. This was his kind of game, and I thought he was brilliant with those long runs. The offensive line did a really good job opening holes. And he gained more yards last night than he had gained in the previous 11 games.
And once he got going, it was kind of the end of Chandler. I mean, it was all, was there an injury?
Yep.
I was
Yeah, he
unaware.
had an ankle injury.
I didn't even see that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I wondered why in the world he didn't even get a carry. All right. Let's talk about the snapping of the 3-game losing streak to Vanderbilt, just the importance. You know, if you're the University of Tennessee, you're trying to turn the program around. If you're Jeremy Pruitt, it's almost like job one is ending that streak to Vanderbilt, is it not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because think about it. If you have to talk to recruits in the state of Tennessee and you continuously have to say, well, we will beat Vanderbilt next year. We'll beat Vanderbilt next year. I mean, eventually you have to say we didn't win the state championship. I mean, we've got a team better than us in Nashville. So I think this really helps them in so many ways of saying, hey, things are back to normal. We're back to where we were. We can see the way things are going. Look at our record in the SEC. Look what we did in November. I think all of that just helps them go throughout that. Not to mention, if you lose to Vanderbilt in this situation, the people that were saying you did a good job are all of a sudden going to be saying fire you again immediately after that game.
Yeah, it would have flipped back again. You would have done you'd have had 2 turnarounds in 1 year. Let me ask you the big picture here. And we said, if they somehow turn this around and wind up going 7-5, this is going to be the question that's asked. So now I'm going to ask it. Do you give full marks to Jeremy Pruitt for 7-5? Now, a lot of people had that, reasonable people had that as their expectation. A lot of people had a better expectation than 7-5. But he goes 7-5. The degree of difficulty was harder than I thought it was going to be. But you should have finished 8-4. Could have finished 9-3. Do you give him full credit? Do you take points off? How do you look at this? 7-5 good or 7-5 bad?
I look at the whole scope from game 1 to game 12, and I think 7-5 is pretty good, but I still have to ding them for Georgia State, and I still have to ding them for not being in a prevent against Brigham Young. So overall, I think they did a really good job, but they lost a couple of opportunities, I think, because I don't think the coaches had them ready for game 1 or in a prevent in game 2.
Okay.
Yeah, can the answer be good enough? Not necessarily good, but good enough, because you still got to 7-5 and playing well in the second half of the season. That's created this belief and the optimism moving forward that we'll talk about. But that still happened this season. Like there's the SEC Coach of the Year talk, and that's going to be Ed Orgeron at LSU. If Tennessee were 9-3,
hold off on that.
Yeah, if Tennessee were 9-3, there'd be a lot more talk about that. So you have to take a point off if you're looking at what could have been 8-4, 9-3. If you're going to talk about the Tennessee standard, what it is, well. The standard, if that was there, it was taken away because of early season losses.
I can also look at this from a different angle. If I'm the coaching staff in there, there's probably going to be years in the years to come that I could say I had much better years, but what I did this year as far as coaching turnaround to get this team to form together and become a winning team, personally, if I'm on this coaching staff, this might be one of the best coaching jobs I've ever done to get this team to go from where they were to where they are at the end of the year. Outside looking in, you still have to take away because of the Georgia State, because of the BYU game. But I guarantee on the inside, a lot of guys, when they look back on their careers, are going to talk about this season probably being the best job they ever did.
I compared this team to the 1981 Vols last week, and that's a team that Johnny Majors continued to praise for that very reason. Didn't win a championship, didn't beat a team with a ranking in front of it, and yet they went from 0-2 to 8-4. And he felt that was one of his favorite teams. I think you're right. Same thing here. That's a heck of a turnaround. Bob, full marks or Doc?
No, you got your 5-game start was an F, failure. Your next 7 games, I think you got an A. So if you're in class and you get an F and an A, yeah, that's points off your A. And I think that's where they are. I think give them an A post Georgia, but before Georgia, you give them an F.
I would simply say meets expectations. Ironically, it looked for a while like they weren't going to, and they made it harder on themselves, but they met expectations. So, and that's
actually
a heck of a
surpassed
job.
mine. I said 6-6.
I said 7-5. Well, I'm just okay. I think most people said 7-5, 6-6. I said 6-6. I said 7-5 last year on our final show, and then wishy-washed back, or I could have said told you.
And those Tennessee fans with the over 6.5 tickets, they'll give you an A because
That's right. Yeah, but I think that's pretty much met expectations. I think because that evens it out in terms of you blew a couple, but then you made up for it. The SEC record was better than people thought.
Yeah.
We'll discuss all that. How does Jeremy Pruitt stack up against other UT coaches after 2 years? How does he stack up against second-year coaches across the country who were hired when he was hired? We'll talk about those Coach of the Year honors and a whole lot more. Come on back on the Sports Horse.